Gene, in your opinion, did yesterday's hearings do anything to lower the temperature of the scrutiny on Apple and Google?
No, it's actually just heating up. And the reality is that this is really a witch hunt that's going on against these two companies. The data that they collect isn't being used adversely in terms of any privacy issues. But I think we're still very early in this. I think this is going to be an issue for the next decade.
So have we entered an era where the single biggest competitive threat to Apple, Google, maybe even Facebook and a bunch of other companies aren't each other, but the government? And I'm not just talking about the U.S. government. It could be the EU, and in some cases, it could be the Chinese government.
Well, there's definitely a lot of competition between the two, but if you look back at Microsoft, their huge run really started to come to an end when the EU stepped in and started to regulate them more heavily. And so this definitely has an impact. And how it's not about the $500 million. Google's going to do close to $30 billion in revenue. And so what it's more about is them changing their business practices that don't allow them to monetize their products as much. That's the big long-term issue for Google and Apple.
You called it a witch hunt. Why does it seem, and if in fact you're right, if they're going after, vapors, why is it that we hear quotes like this from Jessica Rich? She's the deputy director of the FTC's Consumer Protection Bureau. She said, quote, "The rapid growth of mobile products and services creates many opportunities for consumers, but also raises serious privacy concerns." We had the commissioner of the FTC in here not long ago. He seems like a very reasonable guy. In your opinion, are there not serious privacy concerns, or is the scrutiny warranted?
I don't think the scrutiny is warranted. And I think the reason is this, is that these mobile devices, or whether you're doing searches, it's not associated with your name, your address. It's just a simple IP address. And so what they're doing is they're using this data to optimize the products more for you. If they were connecting your name to this device, that would be a privacy problem, in my opinion. But in this case, they're not making that connection. I guess it's up to the goodwill of Google and Apple not to make that final connection.
So let's bring it home to the issue that concerns you most and ultimately concerns your clients, the investment community. How do investors price in the regulatory risk that clearly comes from being dominant in industries that matter so much to the modern economy?
I think what investors do is look at which companies are going to have just this repetitive regulatory risk. And I think Google's in a greater position to do that, just because if you look at their share, it's so great. It's about 65% of the global search market is Google. In Apple's case, they still have really surprisingly small share, 18% in the phone market, 5% in the PC market. And so I think the way investors think about this is they really are more concerned about the companies with the greatest share. In this case, it's Google.
Is it at all possible, Gene, to ballpark a percentage that you could say is the regulatory overhang on either of these stocks now, or as these hearings and inquisitions build up in the future?
Yeah, what you could do is use Microsoft as an example. And essentially, when the EU hearings started to heat up several years ago, the stock essentially started to do nothing. And I think that there is this continual belief that it was going to get more difficult for Microsoft to really expand their dominance. And so if you're going to ask to put a percentage on it, I think it limits the upside. What could that be? It could be 10, 15% to the stock over years.
Do you think, as a result, I mean, Microsoft has had to do things differently. Might Google or Apple or others have to change their business model? Might Google, for example, have to stop giving away Android for free, because clearly the whole point is to capture this mobile advertising market? Is that a potential remedy that maybe, say, regulators might pursue, or the company might be forced into of its own accord?
Yes, I mean, they could be things like that, having to charge for products that they give away free. It also could be things that actually could be more damaging to Google or Apple. It would be the ability not to capture and to save this data. And so it's things like that basically this data is critical. If you look at the core of what Google has, it's data. And so their ability to use that data, if that gets impacted, that's the real problem for Google.